The person who told me this story was an acquaintance of an acquaintance. We casually called him Double Brother, Ijuke. Double Brother said he grew up hearing a lot of stories about his grandfather. His grandfather had spent his entire life living quietly, moving between the mountains and the people, never living a life of being possessed by something. However, there was one peculiar detail that always stuck out. It was the story that when his grandfather was young, he had lived and worked in Japan for a long time. Because of this, he could speak Japanese, not perfectly, but enough to ask for directions, understand explanations, and carry on a conversation. And then, there is a strange event that his grandfather allegedly experienced with a certain Taoist before Double Brother was even born. Double Brother called that man Master Taoist, and his grandfather always described him as a person who didn't seem like a person. One night, while his grandfather was eating dinner, the door suddenly swung open, and the Taoist entered. As soon as he sat down, he said with a grumble, "Sigh, I lost a bet." When his grandfather asked, "What kind of bet?" the Taoist, still looking annoyed, set down his chopsticks, no, his spoon, and said, "Isn't today the day? The day the mountain opens in reverse?" His grandfather had never heard of such a thing. The Taoist, sounding bored, continued his explanation. He said that on some mountains, on very rare occasions, truly rare, there is a day when a boat that climbs in reverse floats by. That boat climbs up the mountain, defying the terrain. The souls that board that boat, whether they are haunted by regrets, sins, or whatever, they let go of everything they were clinging to in this world, and they are given a chance to be reborn. That is the kind of boat it is. On that day, the souls wandering the mountains flock there all at once, drinking and making noise, having what you might call a festival. The Taoist went there, and he said he made a bet with an existence like a mountain god. Can all the wandering souls board this boat, or can they not? The mountain god bet on, they cannot. And the Taoist bet on, they all will. Then the time came, and the boat floated up. The souls lined up and boarded one after another. However, at the very end, there was just one, a very small soul left behind. It was the soul of a child. The boat had already started to drift upward, and the child was standing there unable to take a step, with a face that looked like it was about to cry. At that moment, from on top of the boat, a man climbed down. Without saying a word, the man grabbed the child's wrist, pulled them up, and put them on the boat. The boat continued to climb up the mountain in reverse and vanished. The Taoist, having witnessed that scene, said, "That is what you call mercy." And right there, the Taoist lost the bet. He said the mountain god laughed and told him, "Fine. Since you lost, you must clean up after that man, every single knot he has left behind in this world." His grandfather said he could never forget the look on the Taoist's face at that moment. A man who was always calm, gritting his teeth, letting out a very low, heavy sigh. The Taoist had spent days in silence, but one day, he suddenly told his grandfather to get ready. "We are going to Japan." When his grandfather asked why, the Taoist said straightforwardly, "The man who climbed off the boat, that soul, is still here. And that is a matter for the Japanese side." His grandfather was surprised and instinctively asked back, "Master Taoist, can you speak Japanese?" "I cannot." The Taoist said this as if it were obvious, which is why his grandfather ended up accompanying him, to serve as a guide and, if necessary, an interpreter. A few days later, they traveled to Japan and headed toward a mountain. After passing through a village, and climbing the mountain path for quite a while, just as they were about to run out of breath, a temple appeared. However, to be precise, it wasn't quite a temple. On the outside, it looked like one. But there was a faint, lingering presence that felt unlike a temple. They sat down to rest for a moment in a place that looked like a rest area. That was when his grandfather happened to glance to the side. He noticed a rice ball sitting next to the chair. His grandfather said, "There might be an owner for that, let's not touch it." But the Taoist calmly picked up the rice ball, and ate it right then and there. When his grandfather hurriedly said something, the Taoist just shrugged. We have simply received what we needed. Once the Taoist finished eating the rice ball, he scanned his surroundings and said in a terribly quiet voice, "This place is good for humans to live in, but it is also good for ghosts to live in." That was when his grandfather first began to feel a dark, ominous sensation deep in his chest. On the way into the temple, the Taoist suddenly stopped. And with just one sentence, he said, "There is no Buddha here." His grandfather didn't understand the meaning of that. "It's a temple, how can you say there is no Buddha?" The Taoist said, "It doesn't mean there is no Buddha statue. It means there is no intention to follow the will of the Buddha, that is what it means." The moment those words were finished, a monk walked down from the depths of the temple. The monk said, in Japanese, as if he had been waiting the whole time, "I have been expecting you. Please, come this way." His grandfather said that at that moment, a chill ran down his spine. No matter who came, the phrase "I have been expecting you" sounded too precise, too prepared. The two followed the monk inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, his grandfather said he felt as if he were choking. The pressure he hadn't felt outside immediately bore down on him the moment he stepped inside. Just then, an old woman emerged from the depths. Her attire and the way she walked were different from the monks, and the moment the Taoist saw her, his expression hardened. The old woman did not speak in Japanese, she spoke in Chinese. "I have been expecting your arrival, please, come inside." That was when his grandfather finally realized. While this place was a Japanese temple, in a sense, it didn't belong to Japan at all. As they went deeper inside, he saw a strange line in front of the entrance. They had human shapes, but they weren't human. They were thinner than people. Yet, they definitely had a form. They were just standing still. Yet it was as if they were breathing. Their presence was trembling faintly. Just as his grandfather instinctively tried to step back, the Taoist said in a low voice, "Those were made using humans as raw material." His grandfather said he felt angry at those words. No matter the reason, in any country, to make something using humans as raw material, that was crossing the line. But the Taoist nodded as if he already knew. The customs of this house are not the problem. There is another, true reason why they were made. The Taoist looked at the old woman and said, "Where is it? Lead the way." There was a place in the depths of the temple where they worshipped it, but it seems it burned down in a lightning strike a generation ago. At the moment the fire broke out, the pots shattered, and the things inside them became mixed together. Things made of obsession can eat one another and grow even larger. In the end, it had grown so bloated that it was beyond help, and they said they were barely holding it down with seals. The Taoist asked coldly, "Can't you just keep it sealed?" The old woman shook her head. "It is not that we have not tried. Because of it, 10 high priests have lost their lives. And now," she said, "the only way left is to feed it. Little by little, little by little. If they don't, it will burst out of the temple, and if it gets outside, a catastrophe will begin." The moment he heard that, his grandfather couldn't understand it. Just how big of a thing did you create, to sacrifice so many people for it? Then, the Taoist said one thing. "Let's go inside." But it wasn't a place anyone could enter. The very ground there sapped one's energy, and it was said that ordinary monks couldn't even get near it. They even heard a story that a monk once entered out of curiosity, and his legs became stuck and he couldn't get out. In the end, the old woman who performs the rituals opened the door and went inside with the Taoist. His grandfather was left outside to keep watch. The inside. It was too crude to be called a seal. They had built a water channel around the area where the pots were worshipped, and ropes, knots, and strange patterns surrounded it on all sides. He said it was an unstable border, like lines drawn in a hurry by a child. After a while, the two came back out, but the Taoist's face was completely different. He was not the relaxed man he usually was. That day, he was so angry that it seemed his eyes were rolling back in his head, and the Taoist said to the old woman, "Gather everyone who lives in this house." That one sentence fell like a thunderbolt. That is what he said. When the temple household gathered, the Taoist got straight to the point. Who made the Shikigami? The old woman explained the creation process, which was horrifying. Keeping only the body of a child whose mind hadn't fully developed, and through starvation and agony, pulling out their intense emotions like threads, to create the Shikigami. What remained in the box was a vengeful spirit. The Japanese side had twisted this method even further, for purposes far removed from life. The Taoist declared to those gathered, "This is all your karma. If this thing leaves the temple, the catastrophe will fall upon you." The Taoist said he would return to China to bring back all his associates and equipment, which would take a month. During that month, he ordered them to clear the area around the temple and set up gates in the 4 cardinal directions to divide the paths. He then told the grandfather, "You stay here. Protect this place for the month." When his grandfather asked if he could do it, the Taoist replied briefly, "You can. It must be you." The Taoist left, and his grandfather remained at the temple. What was strange was that for the first week, he truly saw nothing at all. In a place like this, normally, even a faint presence should come and go. But it was as if it had been abruptly cut off and had disappeared. Instead, outside the temple, a strange butterfly was flying about. It wasn't a butterfly as an insect. It's hard to explain, but it was like a butterfly that only those who know would know. His grandfather said that rather than being scared, he found it ominous. Because he had the feeling that something was quietly, meticulously, preparing the place. About 2 weeks later, more people came to visit. 2 reporters. They said they were chasing rumors that the temple takes people away. Missing persons, corpses, strange rituals. Rumors were swirling, and they had come to verify them. Even when the monks tried to chase them away, the reporters wouldn't leave easily. Eventually, one of them snuck inside. And it was a female reporter. The problem was that that night was the day a forbidden ritual was to be held at the temple. The old woman had said that she normally performed a ritual of distributing the feed, little by little to maintain the balance of the seal. The ritual itself wasn't sexual, but it had far too many elements that would shake a person's spirit. They said that if there was even one gap, the mark would seize that opening and latch onto them. That night, the female reporter stepped on the center line of the ritual, and from that moment on, she was no longer a chosen one, but a marked one. The female reporter ran off as if fleeing. And before she knew it, she had arrived near the restricted area. There was a boundary that humans were not supposed to cross. A place even the monks kept their distance from. As he chased after her, his grandfather said he saw a sight hard to believe. Deep inside the shrine, from a place where darkness seemed to pool, a shadowy arm reached out smoothly. It was so large that it could no longer be thought of as a human hand, but it didn't seem to be grabbing her body. It looked as if it were gently pulling on the woman's consciousness. The female reporter, with a vacant expression, slowly walked toward a place that looked like a pond. As if someone were calling to her right by her ear, she was being led entirely in that direction. His grandfather said that at that moment, he felt like he was choking and his body stiffened. If that was real, if things continued like this, it would be beyond repair. His grandfather gritted his teeth, gently took the woman's arm and turned her back this way. Held his hand up in front of her face so she couldn't look outside. Led her to where there were other people. And had her wait quietly in a room for a while. And then, his grandfather realized, this woman was no longer the one being targeted. She had become the trigger, connecting to the other side. From that day on, the female reporter began to hear and see strange things. Every night, she heard the sound of snakes slithering, and every night, a woman in a kimono appeared outside her window, inching closer. The monks and his grandfather warned her, You are seeing it not because you are weak, but because they are forcing you to. Eventually, her colleague took her down the mountain, but the next day, she returned alone. The man had been hit by a car, claiming the traffic light looked green to him. When the woman cried, "It truly looked green to me too," his grandfather realized the truth. This was no longer just about illusions. It was a stage where the curse was destroying her perception of reality itself, leading her toward death. One day, the female reporter said, "I'd like to take a little walk." His grandfather insisted, "Don't go too far." And the woman circled the temple yard. At that moment, she saw a small child. Though a child, there was something adult-like about them. Their expression was strangely detached, and that, paradoxically, made it look unnatural. The child was holding something like a sweet. And since the woman hadn't been able to eat properly for days, she thoughtlessly took it and put it in her mouth. After she finished eating and said, "Thank you," the child smiled and said, "You ate it." That was all. When the woman returned to his grandfather, his face turned deathly pale. "What? Did you just eat?" When she explained, his grandfather said in a low voice, "There are no children at this temple." At those words, the female reporter felt as if her mouth were freezing shut. She hurriedly tried to spit it out, but it was already swallowed. His grandfather muttered low, "It can't fit all at once. So it changes you slowly. But now, it's too fast." That night, the female reporter saw a strange sight. Small girls were dancing in front of her, singing songs, spinning round and round. Each time that was repeated, she slowly turned her head to the side. And in the end, her neck moved smoothly, as if being invited, to an angle that a person would never normally move to. Out of fear, the female reporter nearly reflexively followed the movement. At that moment, a sickening sensation ran around her neck, and she nearly collapsed. His grandfather immediately supported her shoulders and arms, urging her to calm down. The woman slumped to the floor and wept. His grandfather said at that time, "She has been completely invaded." On the final day, the woman was in a state where she had almost lost consciousness. Her body would not move as she wanted. The way she exerted force was all mixed up, and her joints were stiff in an unnatural way. Though it was her own body, it felt like it wasn't hers and seemed as if it might break at any moment, so those around her had to support her. At that moment, the Taoist arrived a day earlier than scheduled. The moment he saw the woman's face, he inhaled sharply, and immediately took her outside, where there was fresh air. Warm water. As the Taoist said that, and once the water was brought, he supported her back to calm her down and made her breathe slowly. Then, rather than gagging painfully, she seemed to be finally spitting out something that had been caught deep in her throat. What came out was not a liquid, but hair, shreds of silk, and things like wet threads. Seeing that, the old woman hardened her face and said, "That is what was used for the sealing." Instead of answering, the Taoist scanned his surroundings once and said in a low voice, "I am late. But it is not over yet." As morning broke, the Taoist positioned the people who had come with him. 4 gates, east, west, south, and north. He placed a pot in front of each gate and said never to open them. And the Taoist ordered them to gather a certain energy. Not an evil energy, but a cold one. He deliberately hardened that energy, making it into a block like ice, and used it to press down the flow of the forbidden place. The Taoist drank some alcohol. His grandfather said it was the alcohol the Taoist drank only when he was about to use great power. "I will put my physical body to sleep and send only my spirit ahead." The Taoist opened one of the gates and went inside. The moment the gate closed, a hot energy reportedly surged up from within. Outside, the people he had brought with him kept striking instrument-like objects, continuing to create a sound in a steady rhythm. And on the Taoist's side, reportedly, a dance-like movement continued in time with that sound. Then, at one moment, the Taoist shouted toward the outside, "Now!" His grandfather said he could never forget the scene that followed. From one side, something like a white bull appeared. It was a bull, but it wasn't a bull. Its size was too strange. Its exhaled breath was cold. And he felt the look in its eyes was eerily human-like. That white bull lifted the black mass that had leaped out of the forbidden place with its horns and pushed it into the pot. As the mass tried to enter the pot, a presence resisting like crazy surged from behind, looking as if it were ramming its body into the bull. The Taoist gritted his teeth and kept pressing the pot down until the very end. At last, the mass was sucked into the pot, and he felt as if the air outside the gate had been popped out in an instant. After the ritual ended, the Taoist apparently said nothing for a while. The old woman, the monks, the members of the clan, not a single one of them could utter a sound as they stood there, and the female reporter lay on the floor, just breathing. His grandfather asked cautiously, "Is this the end?" Instead of answering, the Taoist looked just once toward the rest area where they had eaten the rice ball, and said very softly, "That rice ball from earlier." When his grandfather asked, "What about it?" the Taoist said, "From that point on, we were already being invited. If we hadn't eaten it, the path might have changed." His grandfather felt like he understood those words, yet he didn't want to. That a single rice ball could invite someone. What kind of ridiculous story was that? But the words he heard upon entering the temple kept overlapping in his mind. "I have been expecting you." That single sentence. And then, the double brother added at the end. The real aftermath, it starts from the day the Taoist climbed the mountain once more. Because that day was the day of the feed that the old woman had spoken of.